Hi there. In this lecture we see Joseph Kupper against Mikhail Tal in 1959 Zurich tournament. So in Switzerland, e4 from Kupper. And we have a Sicilian Defense, knight f3, d6, d4, c takes, knight takes d4, knight f6, knight c3, and the Najdorf variation, a6. We see bishop g5, e6, f4, b5, queen f3, bishop b7, bishop d3, bishop e7. And white's play looks pretty reasonable and aggressive here after castling queenside. Tal plays queen b6, rook he1. It looks like a very sweet looking, aesthetically sweet looking position in a way. Knight bd7 is played. If black takes, by the way, here, then that runs into a trap. Bishop takes b5 check, just in case you were wondering. Winning the queen. So something to bear in mind, that kind of tactic. So knight bd7. We see knight ce2. Now knight c5. This seems logical, and black hasn't committed to castling. Just putting more pressure on that e4 pawn is a common theme generally for black here. And white actually commits a mistake, it seems, with bishop takes f6, giving black the dark square bishop without a counterpart. This can be extremely dangerous to do this. A better move in a theoretical sense, it seems, is knight g3. If h6, bishop h4, this seems as though it's still quite nice for black, but it's not as bad as the game in theory. Black's only got a small edge here. We see bishop takes f6, and actually this bishop, after bishop takes f6, can be potentially preserved on this diagonal. We see g4, but Tal doesn't preserve it. It's funny, he plays actually knight a4. It seems g6 might actually be even more accurate than Tal's continuation, because of g5, bishop g7, there's a restraint order on the pawn, the e pawn is pinned. So what does white actually do here? If h4, h5 is possible, say this situation with f5, black does actually have an amazing tactical resource in this kind of situation, which maybe is interesting to break up white's pawns, which is d5. So even on f6, just play d takes, and the bishop's trapped. So for example here, and this is actually rather nice for black. So yes, even if the bishop is attempted to be crushed with a pawn storm, it seems as though black has resources. So all in all, g6 does seem to be rather nifty. If f5, then we can just take that pawn's pinned to the queen, and let's say knight takes f5, then this can be taken, and actually even castling is possible. We can take out that, and we can actually play queen g6. There's no attack there of significance. So anyway, knight a4 was played, and we have the move c3 supporting the d4 knight, b4. So Tal's play looks very logical. Bishop c2, and now a very, very interesting move indeed. So what do you think Tal played in this position? It looks as though it's asking to be played, at least intuitively. So for 100 points. Okay, knight takes b2. It brings out the king, kind of a la Morphy. It's creating win probability, because the onus now is on white to play very accurate moves. Humans don't generally play very accurately for too long. So maybe one or two but accurate moves, but yeah, this is quite a requirement here. Now black castles. Rook b1 is already an inaccuracy of sorts. King d3, it turns out this situation should be okay for white. For example, if rook takes c2, this is strange stuff, but this is possible where white has a small edge. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, there are dangers in the position like bishop a6 or knight takes to factor in. So anyway, rook b1 is the first kind of sign of a mistake. Queen a5 check is played. Here, actually, bishop takes d4 check is interesting as well. After rook ac8 check, and this situation is rather interesting to consider. Black actually gets a significant edge here in this scenario, but queen a5 check was played. King d3, rook ac8, queen f2. The thing is, rook takes b7 has a weakness for the last move. Just neglects e1. We can just take on e1 there. So queen f2 protects e1, and now the bishop does move. But here it's a critical mistake, it seems. Rook b3. Instead, g5 could have been used to nudge this bishop. This is what I mean about preserving this bishop on this diagonal. If the bishop is pushed off the diagonal, then white should be able to hold this position. For example, this is just an example continuation like this with king d1. And where is the attack? It's not exactly convincing all the time. It's about even, actually. So it seems g5, and if bishop takes, queen takes d4 is possible. Okay, so rook b3 though was played. And yeah, Tal actually energizes the whole position here. It's quite instructive. So the first thing is e5. This is sometimes a great prelude to d5. So e5 locks down the e4 pawn so that the pawn, hasn't got the option of e5. So e5 as a prelude to d5. Actually, just for the record, to demonstrate this e5 d5 business, it's a very important mechanism to be aware of. We want to be able to play d5 with maximum effectiveness, so not allowing the response e5. So it's kind of pinning down the pawn to blockade it first with e5. If we play d5 here instead of e5, we play d5. White just plays e5 and it shuts down that bishop a bit. And this should be pleasant enough for white. White should be able to hold this with an advantage in theory. White is material up. So yes, it changes the whole situation when we play e5 first. And white plays g5 here just to illustrate why d5 can be so powerful. In fact, this is the strongest move here, d5. There are other great moves as well to consider, like rook takes c2, but d5 really opens up, the glare of the bishops. The crossfire of the bishops is opened up with this central tension. It's very, very interesting to consider this thematically. For example, here e4 is a beauty, really opening up things. You can see the bishops are on full power now across these diagonals, and white's not going to last too long after rook takes c2. Big advantage. If we look at this again with f takes, d takes e4, this is just a nightmare for white, essentially. A nightmare scenario. It's all crumbling down. Yeah, it's black's going to be checkmating, essentially, the king. For example, like this, as an example, it's going to be ending in checkmate pretty soon. So yes, the whole mechanisms for e5 before d5, that's something a Sicilian Najdorf player needs to be kind of aware of, to kind of liberate the position, open up the bishops. If you've got the bishop pair like this, even more important in a general sense, as a general kind of principle. So rather than d5 going into a kind of, if you think about it, d5 is going into a French defense kind of styles pawn structure, and the French defense is more closed in nature, and white needs to close things up, so this creates that lock on the pawn chain instead. So a big difference to play e5 rather than d5, massive difference in effectiveness to consider. We're essentially using a kind of virtual pin by pinning down the pawn first, so it can't react with e5. We're locking it down. Okay. g5 was played though, not really indulging here too much, Mikhail Tal. So g5, let's run with this. This is complicated enough. E takes d4 is played, knight takes d4. Here, it's worth pointing out though that g takes f6 runs into something extremely horrible What does black play here? Which is a high priority forcing move because it kind of threatens a mate in 1. For 100 points, what would you play in this variation? Okay. Rook takes c2, yeah, it threatens queen d2. If king takes, then queen takes a2 check, bishop takes e4 check. It's all crumbling. It's absolutely crumbling. This is just a disaster. If white has to play like this, it's just absolutely winning. And, you know, if we look at this again, if f takes, then that was the mate threat. Pardon me. There's nothing much there, actually. So that is pretty convincing. Rook takes c2. It's pretty much convincing. So knight takes d4 was played. But now, quite abrupt end to the game, actually. Bishop takes d4. And white actually resigned here. If king takes d4, then we have queen c5 check and win the queen. We win the queen. So, okay, if queen takes d4, we just take the rook. And we're material up. This is very nice indeed. So, yes, it's a very tactical game indeed. An intuitive knight sack to expose the king. It brings back the games of Morphy to my mind, where the king's brought out for practical win probability, even if it's not theoretically totally winning. There was an interesting opportunity even to upgrade a better representation of the position, it seems, with this g6 preserving the bishop. It seems there are actually tactical resources to support preserving the bishop, even though g5 and f5 looks a bit squishy. So that's another interesting kind of find from this game, an interesting point maybe to bear in mind. The dark square bishop, how can we actually preserve this? Because sometimes it is a lethal weapon when there's no kind of counterpart bishop. So anyway, yeah, very, very interesting how, yeah, this situation is a great way of exposing the king. So c3, because of the power of that bishop putting, you know, pressure on d4, it's all a kind of chain reaction of events, essentially, culminating in a very difficult to play position here. But I believe this is the key blunder, it seems, the key mistake. So g5 had to be played here, and black's best, it turns out, is bishop d8. And then the position can be tamed a little bit by white, it seems. But that wasn't the case. So yeah, I mean, sometimes if the positions are simply so difficult to play, then people are going to break under the pressure as human beings, like they did here, spectacularly broken. The need for accuracy is, you know, a requirement which is too much to handle for a lot of humans, at least. Okay, thanks very much. Hi there, thanks for getting to the end of the YouTube video. If you would like to see other Mikhail Tal games, I actually have an amazing course for Mikhail Tal, which is currently at 4.9 with over 400 students. You can check this out from the Kingscrusher TV page, so Chess Strategy and Tactics, Mikhail Tal's amazing games. You can check out some free preview videos as well here. If you do expand all sections, you can see the preview links to get some free previews. So I hope you do check out this course index and the free previews. So I really had a thrilling time actually checking out Mikhail Tal's games. So yeah, the YouTube video here you saw was just a sample from this course. I hope you check it out. Okay, thanks so much. Oh, by the way, comments, questions, likes, shares, all appreciated. And if you did get to this part of the video, please do leave some sort of comment like Tal fan. Okay, thanks again.